Shabbat Shalom. We are in Parashah number 4, Vayera, which begins in Genesis chapter 18, and will run through, completely through chapter 22. But it's fairly lengthy reading, so I time myself. It's going to take at least 35 minutes for me to read the Torah portion. So that won't leave a whole lot of time for discussion or questions, but there's only really one major point that I want to make, and it's simply in chapter 18. So we'll focus on that, and I'll be using Tony Robinson's thematic analysis. And this particular portion is a great example of thematic analysis. So what I want you to recognize is that we have the different parashah portions. And those are made up of parashot, which is plural. And so there are little sections of that. And the interesting thing, fascinating thing about that is that the entire chapter 18 holds together. There is a common theme throughout that entire chapter. Now, historically, most people have seen chapter 18 of Genesis as two separate stories. But that is not God's intention. And so this is the value, tremendous value of applying and learning and practicing thematic analysis as it applies to God's Word. Because we uncover, by God's grace, connections that at surface view are not connected at all, or don't appear to be. So be thinking about that, certainly, as we read the first chapter of this section, chapter 18. But let's begin with a blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu, melech ha'olam, asher kedeshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzavanu la'asok b'davrei Torah. Blessed are you, Hashem, our God, ruler of the universe, who has sanctified us with commandments and commanded us to study words of Torah. Genesis chapter 18. Adonai appeared to Avraham by the oaks of Mamre as he sat at the entrance to the tent during the heat of the day. He raised his eyes and looked, and there in front of him stood 3 men. On seeing them, he ran from the tent door to meet them, prostrated himself on the ground, and said, "My Lord, if I have found favor in your sight, please don't leave your servant. Please let me send for some water so that you can wash your feet. Then rest under the tree, and I will bring a piece of bread. Now that you have come to your servant, refresh yourselves before going on." "Very well," they replied. "Do what you have said." Abraham hurried into the tent to Sarah and said, "Quickly, 3 measures of the best flour. Knead it and make cakes." Abraham ran to the herd, took a good, tender calf, and gave it to the servant who hurried to prepare it. Then he took curds, milk, and the calf which he had prepared, and set it all before the men. And he stood by them under the tree as they ate. They said to him, "Where is Sarah, your wife?" he said, there, in the tent. He said, I will certainly return to you around this time next year, and Sarah, your wife, will have a son. Sarah heard him from the entrance of the tent behind him. Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in years. Sarah was past the age of childbearing. So Sarah laughed to herself, thinking, I am old, and so is my Lord. Am I to have pleasure again? Adonai said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh and ask, am I really going to bear a child when I am old? I am so old. Is anything too hard for Adonai? At the time set for, at this season, next year, I will return to you, and Sarah will have a son. Sarah denied it, saying, I didn't laugh, because she was afraid. He said, not so. You did laugh. The men set out from there and looked over towards Sodom, and Abraham went with them to see them on their way. Adonai said, should I hide from Abraham what I'm about to do? Inasmuch as Abraham is sure to become a great and strong nation, and all the nations of the earth will be blessed by him. For I have made myself known to him, so that he will give orders to his children and to his household after him, to keep the way of Adonai and to do what is right and just, so that Adonai may bring about for Abraham what he has promised him. Adonai said, the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is so great, and their sin so serious, that I will now go down and see whether their deeds warrant the outcry that has reached me. If not, I will know. The men turned away from there and went toward Sodom, but Abraham remained standing before Adonai. Abraham approached and said, will you actually sweep away the righteous with the wicked? Maybe there are 50 righteous people in the city. Will you actually sweep the place away and not forgive it for the sake of the 50 righteous who are there? Far be it from you to do such a thing, to kill the righteous along with the wicked, so that the righteous and the wicked are treated alike. Far be it from you. Shouldn't the judge of all the earth do what is just? Adonai said, if I find in Sodom 50 who are righteous, then I will forgive the whole place for their sake. Abraham answered, here now I, who am but dust and ashes, have taken it upon myself to speak to Adonai. What if there are 5 less than 50 righteous? He said, I won't destroy it if I find 45 there. He spoke to him again. What if 40 are found there? He said, for the sake of the 40, I won't do it. He said, I hope Adonai won't be angry if I speak. What if 30 are found there? He said, I won't do it if I find 30 there. He said, "Here now, I have taken it upon myself to speak to Adonai. What if 20 are found there?" He said, "For the sake of the 20, I won't destroy it." He said, "I hope Adonai won't be angry if I speak just once more. What if 10 are found there?" He said, "For the sake of the 10, I won't destroy it." Adonai went on his way as soon as he had finished speaking to Abraham, and Abraham returned to his place. Chapter 19. The two angels came to Sodom that evening. When Lot was sitting at the gate of Sodom, Lot saw them, got up to greet them, and prostrated himself on the ground. He said, "Here now, my lords, please come over to your servant's house. Spend the night, wash your feet, get up early, and go on your way." "No," they answered, "we'll stay in the square." But he kept pressing them. So they went home with him, and he made them a meal, baking matzah for their supper, which they ate. But before they could go to bed, the men of the city surrounded the house, young and old, everyone from every neighborhood of Sodom. They called Lot and said to him, "Where are the men who came to stay with you tonight? Bring them out to us. We want to have sex with them." Lot went out to them and stood in the doorway, closing the door behind him, and said, "Please, my brothers, don't do such a wicked thing. Look here, I have 2 daughters who are virgins. Please, let me bring them out to you, and you can do with them what seems good to you. But don't do anything to these men, since they are guests in my house." "Stand back," they replied. "This guy came to live here, and now he decided to play judge? For that, we'll deal worse with you than with them." Then they crowded in on Lot in order to get close enough to break down the door. But the men inside reached out their hands, brought Lot into the house to them, and shut the door. Then they struck the men at the door of the house with blindness, both small and great, so that they couldn't find the doorway. The men said to Lot, "Do you have any people here besides yourself? Whomever you have in the city, son-in-law, your sons, your daughters, bring them out of this place, because we are going to destroy it. Adonai has become aware of the great outcry against them, and Adonai has sent us to destroy it." Lot went out and spoke with his sons-in-law who had married his daughters, and said, "Get up and leave this place, because Adonai is going to destroy the city." But his sons-in-law didn't take him seriously. When morning came, the angels told Lot to hurry. "Get up," they said, "and take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here. Otherwise, you will be swept away in the punishment of the city." But he dallied. So the men took hold of his hand, his wife's hand, and the hands of his 2 daughters. Adonai was being merciful to him, and led them, leaving them outside the city. When they had brought them out, he said, "Flee for your life! Don't look behind you, and don't stop anywhere in the plain, but escape to the hills. Otherwise, you will be swept away." Lot said to them, "Please, no, my lord. Here, your servant has already found favor in your sight, and you have shown me even greater mercy by saving my life. But I can't escape to the hills because I'm afraid the disaster will overtake me and I will die. Look, there's a town nearby to flee to, and it's a small one. Please, let me escape there. Isn't it just a small one? And that way I will stay alive." He replied, "All right, I agree to what you have asked. I won't overthrow the city of which you have spoken. Hurry and escape to that place, because I can't do anything until you arrive there." For this reason, the city was named Zoar, small. By the time Lot had come to Zoar, the sun had risen over the land. Then Adonai caused sulfur and fire to rain down upon Sodom and Gomorrah from Adonai out of the sky. He overthrew those cities, the entire plain, all the inhabitants, and the cities and everything growing in the ground. But his wife looked back from behind him, and she became a column of salt. Abraham got up early in the morning, went to the place he had stood before Adonai, and looked out toward Sodom and Gomorrah, scanning the entire plain. There, before him, the smoke was rising from the land like smoke from a furnace. But when God destroyed the cities of the plain, he remembered Abraham and sent Lot out, away from the destruction, which he overthrew the cities in which Lot lived. Lot went up from Zoar and lived in the hills with his 2 daughters, because he was afraid to stay in Zoar. He and his 2 daughters lived in a cave. The firstborn said to the younger, "Our father is old, and there isn't a man on earth to come into us in a manner customary in the world. Come, let's have our father drink wine, then we'll sleep with him. And that way, we'll enable our father to have descendants." So they plied their father with wine that night, and the older one went in and slept with her father. He didn't know when she lay down or when she got up. The following day, the older said to the younger, "Here, I slept last night with my father. Let's make him drink wine again tonight, and you go in and sleep with him. And that way we'll enable our father to have descendants." They plied their father with wine that night also. And the younger one got up and slept with him. And he didn't know when she lay down or when she got up. Thus, both the daughters of Lot became pregnant by their father. The older one gave birth to a son and called him Moab. He is the ancestor of Moab to this day. The younger also gave birth to a son, and she called him Ben-Ami. He is the ancestor of the people of Ammon to this day. Chapter 20. Abraham traveled from there toward the Negev and lived between Kadesh and Shur, while living as an alien in Gerar. Abraham was saying of Sarah, his wife, "She is my sister." So Abimelech, king of the Gerar, sent and took Sarah. But God came to Abimelech in a dream one night and said to him, "You are about to die because of the woman you have taken, since she is someone's wife." Now Abimelech had not come near her. So he said, "Oh, Lord, will you kill even an upright nation? Didn't he himself say to me, 'She is my sister'? And even she herself said, 'He is my brother'? In doing this, my heart has been pure, and my hands innocent." God said to him in the dream, "Yes, I know that in doing this, your heart has been pure, and I too have kept you from sinning against me. This is why I didn't let you touch her. Therefore, return the man's wife to him now. He is a prophet, and he will pray for you so that you will live. But if you don't return her, know that you will certainly die, you and all who belong to you." Abimelech got up early in the morning, called all his servants, and told them these things, and the men became very afraid. Then Abimelech called Abraham and said to him, "What have you done to us? How have I sinned against you to cause you to bring on me and my kingdom a great sin? You have done things to me that are just not done." Abimelech went on, asking Abraham, "Whatever could have caused you to do such a thing?" Abraham replied, "It was because I thought there could not possibly be any fear of God in this place. So they will kill me in order to get my wife. But she actually is also my sister, the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother. And so she became my wife. When God had me leave my father's house, I told her, 'Do me this favor. Wherever we go, say about me, he is my brother.' Abimelech took sheep, cattle, and male and female slaves, and gave them to Abraham. And he returned to him Sarah his wife. Then Abimelech said, 'Look, my country lies before you. Live where you like.' To Sarah he said, 'Here, I have given your brother 1,000 pieces of silver. That will allay the suspicions of everyone who is with you. Before everyone, you are cleared.' Abraham prayed to God, and God healed Abimelech and his wife and slave girls so that they could have children. For Adonai had made every woman in Abimelech's household infertile on account of Sarah, Abraham's wife." Chapter 21. Adonai remembered Sarah as he had said, and Adonai did for Sarah what he had promised. Sarah conceived and bore Abraham a son in his old age, at the very time God had said to him. Abraham called his son, born to him, whom Sarah bore to him, Yitzhak. Abraham circumcised his son Yitzhak when he was 8 days old, as God had ordered him to do. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Yitzhak, laughter, was born to him. Sarah said, "God has given me good reason to laugh. Now everyone who hears about it will laugh with me." And she said, "Who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Nevertheless, I have borne him a son in his old age." The child grew and was weaned, and Abraham gave a great banquet on the day that Yitzhak was weaned. But Sarah saw the son of Hagar, the Egyptian, whom Hagar had borne to Abraham, making fun of Yitzhak. So Sarah said to Abraham, "Throw this slave girl out and her son. I will not have this slave girl's son as your heir, along with my son Yitzhak." Abraham became very distressed over this matter of his son. But God said to Abraham, "Don't be distressed because of the boy and your slave girl. Listen to everything Sarah says to you, because it is your descendants through Yitzhak who will be counted. But I will also make a nation from the son of the slave girl, since he is descended from you." Abraham got up early in the morning, took bread and a skin of water, and gave it to Hagar, putting it on her shoulder and the child. Then he sent her away. After leaving, she wandered in the desert around Beersheba, when the water in the skin was gone. She left the child under a bush and went and sat down, looking the other way, about a bow shot distance from him, because she said, "I can't bear to watch my child die." So she sat there looking the other way, crying out and weeping. God heard the boy's voice, and the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, "What's wrong with you, Hagar? Don't be afraid, because God has heard the voice of the boy in his present situation. Get up, lift the boy up, and hold him tightly in your hand, because I am going to make him a great nation." Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. So she went, filled the skin with water, and gave the boy water to drink. God was with the boy, and he grew. He lived in the desert and became an archer. He lived in the Paran desert, and his mother chose a wife for him from the land of Egypt. At that time, Abimelech and Pichol, the commander of his army, spoke to Abraham. They said, "God is with you in everything you do. Therefore, swear to me here by God that you will never deal falsely with me or with my son or grandson, but according to the kindness with which I have treated you, you will treat me and the land in which you have lived as a foreigner." Abraham said, "I swear it." Now Abraham had complained to Abimelech about a well which Abimelech's servants had seized. Abimelech answered, I don't know who has done this. You didn't tell me, and I heard about it only today." Abraham took sheep and cattle and gave them to Abimelech, and the two of them made a covenant. Abraham put 7 female lambs from the flock by themselves. Abimelech asked Abraham, "What is the meaning of these 7 female lambs you have put by themselves?" He answered, "You are to accept these 7 female lambs from me as witness that I dug this well." This is why that place was called Beersheba, well of 7, well of an oath, because they both swore an oath there. When they made the covenant at Beersheba, Abimelech departed with Pichol, the commander of his army, and returned to the land of the Philistine. Abraham planted a tamarisk tree in Beersheba, and there he called on the name of Adonai, the everlasting God. Abraham lived for a long time as a foreigner in the land of the Philistines. Chapter 22. After these things, God tested Abraham. He said to him, Abraham! And he answered, Here I am. He said, Take your son, your only son, whom you love, Yitzhak, and go to the land of Moriah. There you are to offer him as a burnt offering on a mountain that I will point out to you. Abraham got up early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took 2 of his young men with him, together with Yitzhak, his son. He cut the wood for the burnt offering, departed, and went toward the place God had told him about. On the 3rd day, Abraham raised his eyes and saw the place in the distance. Abraham said to his young men, Stay here with the donkey. I and the boy will go there, worship, and return to you. Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and laid it on Yitzhak, his son. Then he took in his hand the fire and the knife, and they both went on together. Yitzhak spoke to Abraham his father, My father. He answered, Here I am, my son. He said, I see the fire and the wood, but where's the lamb for a burnt offering? Abraham replied, God will provide himself the lamb for a burnt offering, my son. And they both went on together. They came to the place God had told him about. And Abraham built the altar there, set the wood in order, bound Yitzhak his son, and laid him on the altar, on the wood. Then Abraham put out his hand and took the knife to kill his son. But the angel of Adonai called to him out of heaven, Abraham? Abraham! He answered, Here I am. He said, Don't lay your hand on the boy. Don't do anything to him. For now I know that you are a man who fears God, because you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. Abraham raised his eyes and looked, and there behind him was a ram caught in the bushes by its horns. Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up as a burnt offering in place of his son. Abraham called the place Adonai Vayera. The Lord will see to it. The Lord provides. As it is said to this day, on the mountain Adonai is seen. The angel of Adonai called to Abraham a second time out of heaven. He said, I have sworn by myself, says Adonai, that because you have done this, because you haven't withheld your son, your only son, I will most certainly bless you, and I will most certainly increase your descendants to as many as there are stars in the sky or grains of sand on the seashore. Your descendants will possess the cities of their enemies. And by your descendants, all the nations of the earth will be blessed. Because you obeyed my order. So Abraham returned to his young men. They got up and went together to Beersheba, and Abraham settled in Beersheba. Afterwards, Abraham was told, Milcah too has borne children to your brother Nachor, Uz, his firstborn, Buz, his brother, Kemuel, the father of Aram, Chesed, Hazo, Pildash, Lidlaph, and Betuel. Betuel fathered Rebekah. These 8 Milcah bore to Nachor, Abraham's brother. His concubine, whose name was Reumah, bore children also, Tavach, Gaham, Takash, and Ma'achah. In Genesis chapter 18, Tony points out that there must be a theme for this entire chapter because it is one complete parashot. It stands alone in the Hebrew. So there is a theme. This is one of the principles of thematic analysis. So we have to ask some questions here. What is the connection? We have the angelic visitors. And it appears also one who is more than just angelic. And they come to Abraham while he's in his tent. Now, we don't know the time frames here, but this is after Abraham has been circumcised, so some of the rabbis say he's still recovering from that. Nevertheless, we're not told that, but we are told that Abraham exhibits extraordinary hospitality to these strangers. And so we have the connection of these strangers who are men, but more than just men. The angels will go on to Sodom and Gomorrah to destroy the city. And when they go there, that's the connection. These same messengers sent from God on a mission. And Lot himself also shows hospitality. Now, his hospitality consisted of a meal of matzos. How many really enjoy their matzos? When around Passover time we have the feast of unleavened bread, right? And the only bread in the house, the only bread that we will eat is matzos. Are there any here who still have some matzos left over from Passover? Just wondered about that. Okay. Anyway, so, nevertheless, he pleaded with them, he begged them to come into his house. He knew what kind of city he was living in. And so we see here this is a connection. Also, there's another aspect of the connection to that is made. Because Adonai says, apparently in the presence of Abraham himself, Shall I hide what I'm about to do from Abraham, seeing as he will become a great nation? Look at verses 18 and 19, Genesis chapter 18. Inasmuch as Abraham is sure to become a great and strong nation, and all the nations of the earth will be blessed by him, for I have made myself known to him, so that he will give orders to his children and to his household after him, to keep the way of Adonai, and to do what is right and just, so that Adonai may bring about for Abraham what he has promised him. Now, I have a question to ask you. You be the judge. I'm going to ask you to raise your hand. How many of you would have spared Sodom and Gomorrah? Okay, I saw a couple reluctant hands there. Yeah. Now you know something remarkable about Abraham. Something that sets him apart from the vast majority of people. Are there those that you have thought about? Oh, how much better off our nation would be, dear God, if you would just wipe out. Fill in the blank. Just wipe out. I won't ask, but you can think about it. I won't ask you to show your hands if you have actually thought about or prayed about such an outcome. And God says that Abraham will be a blessing to the nations. Abraham, through his descendants, will be a blessing to the nations. How many think the nations of this world are really messed up, something terrible? Okay, all right, okay. Are they not worthy of God's blessing? No, they're not worthy of it. Of course not. Nevertheless, they will be blessed. God has promised it. He does not renege on his promises. We are part of the blessing to the nations. We are the instrument God intends to use to bless the nations. Such reluctant instruments. But Abraham pleaded, begged with God, and God listened to him. And we also know from this exchange with Abraham just what a horrible state of affairs the nations of the plains of Sodom and Gomorrah had become. This is the land These are the nations that hundreds of years later, the descendants of Abraham as a nation will come in and possess the land, and they will wipe those nations out. But this is the precursor to that. Here, Sodom and Gomorrah are so horrible that their time had come for judgment. Direct divine judgment from God. The like of which we still see the geographic destruction that came upon that plain, which we know as the Dead Sea. Well named. Well named. So, that's the thematic analysis that Tony Robinson brings to our mind, is that this is a fulfillment of God's promise. And it's like, where does this, what corner of God's will does this back me into? What questions or comments do you have? Yes, Kevin. Oh, are you giving me a time? That was not a friendly. Oh, Eve. Okay. I have to watch Kevin because he could be just saying, "You have 5 minutes," or he could say, "I have a question, comment."
Well, I just was myself. I had to look this up real quick. I was thinking to myself that "here I am" is often. I remember reading that, and I remembered Abraham said that, Jacob said that, Moses said that. I remembered Isaiah and Samuel, but I couldn't remember. And I looked it up, and Ananias also said, "Here I am." And so I thought to myself, should not we ourselves be ready to say, "Here I am"?
Good. Yeah, we see a lot of thematic analysis in this section. I wanted to draw our attention to this one because it's such a great example, this first chapter, of thematic analysis, because the stories seem so different from each other. That's good. I could hear you, actually.
I have a very loud mouth. Why didn't he just go from 50 to 10 instead of the game?
All right. That's a great question. Donnie.
So the answer that I'll give is basically from the Midrash. It talks about the 50 to 10. Why didn't it go below 10 is the question. And Abraham, he's thinking, you have to think what happened a few generations back. You had the flood. And in the flood, there were 8 people that survived. So he stops at 10 because he knows if he goes to 5, he's saving less people than would have been saved in the flood.
It's a good answer. It's a good answer. One of the things about that, and I don't know what the correct answer is, but that's a great one. One is that 10 is considered 10 men to form a congregation as well. And so part of the righteous, saving a city for the righteous, is the intercession that goes with that, is so that those righteous will have an impact on that city, on that culture. And so there's a nucleus, there's a group there. And so sparing the righteous, because we do not live off to the side in a little corner, but we proclaim and make known Adonai to those around us. Donnie.
It's also kind of interesting if you go to this week's Haftarah, which is 2 Kings 4, verses 1 through 37. And if you look at the Hebrew, it's very interesting. There's like a couple different stories in the Haftarah. You have the story of the widow who is faced with the possibility that her 2 sons will be sold to pay her debt. And then you have the story about the older lady who is barren. But focusing on the first story, it's kind of interesting because you look at the Hebrew, there's four times where a word should end with a long kaf, but it ends with a silent yod. Like for instance, Mayeshlach, what is there for you in the house? The lach should be a lamed and a kaf, sofit, but it is a lamed, a kaf, and a silent yod. Me'et kol shechenaich, from all your neighbors. That is, she has to go and she has to get oil from get the vessels to pour the oil from all her neighbors. That also should end with a kaf sofit, but it ends with a little yod. And yod makes the A or the E sound that would come at the end of that, but the yod is silent again. And then, if I can find it, it says, go sell the oil, v'shalmi et nishech, and pay your creditors. The nishech, which is your creditors, has a kaf, but then it has a silent yod at the end. Va'at uvanaich, you and your sons, the vanaich has a kaf and a silent yod. So you have 4 times in the Haftarah where you have a silent yod. And I was wondering, what is the connection, right, between the Haftarah? Because you look at the second story, right, it talks about a barren woman who finally has a son in her old age.
Yep.
That is an easy connection. But what is the connection for the first story about a widow who is faced with the possibility of losing her 2 sons? And why, in the whole process where she takes her oil and pours it into vessels to pay the debts, are there 4 times when you have a silent yod? And what is the connection? The connection is yod has a numerical value of 10. And it's like the 10 silent people in Sodom and Gomorrah, right? It takes for that whole city to survive. And so for me, when I was looking at that, it ultimately represents a redemption process. Because if you look at the difference between Abraham and Lot and even Sodom and Gomorrah, there's seasons in your life where your vessels are empty. And the only way to come out of that is for the oil of God's word to fill that up. But in Sodom, there was not a silent yod because you had less than 10. It was only Lot, his wife, and his 2 daughters. That's 4 people. That's half of the 8 that went into the ark. And there wasn't a silent yod there anymore.
That's very good. So, insight from the Hebrew, fantastic. You know, the yod does mean 10, but when it comes at the end of a word, it often is used for possession as well. So there can be ownership implied as well with that. And many times too, with names, a yod is added to represent God's presence. All right. We're out of time. Thank you for your attention.